Welcome to the Legal Selva podcast.
Hello, good morning. Today we're talking with Andrea Paquette. Andrea is the president and co-founder of the Stigma-Free Society based on Vancouver Island in BC. Andrea is a good friend of mine from about 15 years ago or so, and we've managed to reconnect based on this, which makes it even more of a fun project to work with. Andrea is incredibly passionate about engaging in mental health education, providing leadership and support for people struggling or people with questions. And I'm going to let Andrea better explain. Hi, nice to see you again.
Good to see you again. It's an absolute pleasure. It's been too long, and I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time today. I left South Korea in 07 or 08, so that would have been the last time I saw you.
Did I leave before you, or did you go before me?
I think I went just before you. I feel like you were still there at the going away party.
Yeah, no doubt. That was an adventure and a half for 2 years for me, and
Right?
I'm glad that we were able to meet and, hang out in Seoul and get our hair dyed. It was pretty awesome.
I forgot about the hair. Andrea and I were both English teachers in South Korea. Around 2007. Hair dye, jjimjilbangs. We might want to save that for later in the conversation. But Andrea, I remember when we left each other then, you were just starting Bipolar Babe.
Actually, it never became into fruition until I got back to Canada. But remember, I was always talking about how I was writing in my hot Korean apartment, and I was talking about, remember, wanting to start a charity for mental health.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
And
little did I know I would actually do it.
Oh, I had no doubt. You always did exactly what you said you were going to do. But can we talk a little bit about Bipolar Babe and what it was? Because I remember you had a superwoman or a super character in this like hot purple suit and was smashing out the stigma. And I think she
Yeah, definitely
gave little punches. Sure. So you take it from here, because I never really did get to learn a lot about what this was and what came of it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Bipolar Babe originally became a t-shirt. It was just a t-shirt, and that's truly how it began. It became a brand and a website. And when I got back from Korea, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I got a job in the government and doing the traditional thing that I would do. And then I took a workshop called the Landmark Forum. And it was very eye-opening for me because I stood in front of 500 people. I looked around the room when the facilitator asked, "What did you get out of this weekend workshop?" Of course, he picked me out in a crowd, and I had never spoken to anybody public speaking. It was terrifying. But I looked around the room, I grabbed the microphone, and I said, "Everybody, I am Andrea, and I have bipolar disorder. And I've learned that I'm not defined by bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I can live an extraordinary life." And I don't know if you remember, Ange, but I was really stigmatized back in Korea. Like, I was hiding that from my friends previous to when I met you.
Mm-hmm.
It caused me a lot of troubles at work. They didn't want to reimburse my medication. And so when I got back to Canada and I realized, I can live a really awesome life with bipolar. And I learned that with Bipolar Babe, it was just a speaking brand. And I went into my first school with 15 kids, and I shared my story. And I shared it vividly about all the details. And all of that happened before Korea. And it was really great because Korea was a healing place. It was a place where I met new friends like you. And yeah, it was amazing.
So, because when we first met, I had no idea you were Rachel's friend, Andrea. Like, that's how I met you. I thought your diagnosis came while we lived there. Is that incorrect?
That's incorrect. No, it came before. I was hospitalized and for my attempt on my life and for my illness. And that was when I was in Canada and I was 25 years old. And I got out of the hospital and I moved to South Korea in 2 months after my second hospitalization, because I needed to get away. I needed to get away from all the bad memories, the heartache, the pain.
Yeah.
And South Korea was the best decision I made.
Still to this day, no regrets.
No.
So you're living in Canada. How? So I have no really familiarity. How are you diagnosed? Like, what symptoms did you start to see, or you noticed a difference within yourself, or other people commented?
So what ended up happening when I was 25 years old, I was living in Ottawa before Korea, before meeting you and everybody else. And I share my story across USA now. I share it across Canada. I've been professionally speaking about my story for a long time, and I share it because lots of us can relate.
Yeah.
And what happened is I was in Ottawa at the time pursuing my political career. I have a political science degree. I love politics. I would participate in campaigns. I even ran for nomination for MP in Victoria way back when I was like 24 and 25. And I started experiencing while in Ottawa, house sitting for a friend, some very odd experiences. So, as an example, I saw a globe form in front of my face as real as I could touch it. I saw the devil's head dance in front of my face. I was in a major psychosis, it's called. Mm-hmm. So, when somebody's in a psychosis, like myself at that time, I was having a break with reality. And so I couldn't see the difference between what was real and what wasn't real. And I went into what's called a major manic episode with psychotic features. And so mania is when you eventually lose the ability to make wise decisions. Mm-hmm. It is when your that break is very dangerous because you aren't able to tell, what is real. Yeah. And then there was a knock at the door. And it was quite loud, and I went and looked through the peephole, and guess who was there? Nobody. So I was really afraid, mm-hmm. and I ran into the bathroom, called 911, and a police officer came, and he talked to me for about half an hour, and he asked me a series of questions. And then he asked, "Can I call you an ambulance?" And I said, "What? I'm not sick. What are you talking about?" Yeah. But I was so afraid, and I didn't want to be in that house alone. So I went to the hospital, and I was soon admitted. A nurse put her hand on my shoulder and was like, "Hun, you're coming with us." And I was admitted for my first hospitalization in Ottawa, actually. And that was, what an experience. Yeah. And then time went on.
When you so back up. So that knock at the door, that was real in your head. That wasn't, "Oh, wait, did I hear something?" That happened.
It was also real, Angela. It was to the point where the earth that I saw in front of my face, people can't believe that you could potentially see a hallucination unless you're on drugs or things like this. But my brain was playing tricks on me. So I was diagnosed with what's called bipolar type 1, with more mania, prone to psychosis, some depression, because bipolar isn't just up and down. People think it's black and white when there's a lot of gray. Mm-hmm. When we talk about bipolar disorder, we need to understand that the experience can be put down in medical terms, but it's very unique for a lot of people.
I guess I didn't even realize, because in we spent a lot of time together. I felt like you were one of my closer friends there. And I knew that you struggled at times, but was it medication? Because I didn't see this. Like, I didn't see inside your head, but you didn't show it on the outside.
Yeah, that was just one psychotic break. So that's the only time that's ever happened to me in the last 21 years. Okay. And so that was one thing I just really didn't share with anybody, because I was afraid to be negatively judged by anybody, right? And I didn't want that to define me. Mm-hmm. And so, I did struggle at times, but I was put on medication when I was admitted to the hospital the second time. And the medication helped me function in Korea. It helped me live a full life. There's a lot more than just medication. It's a community, like the community we had there, and
Yeah.
friends and therapy and all of these, a doctor, all these things.
Yeah.
And people with mental illness can lead full lives, and sometimes we really can't see it, right? We could see a broken leg or somebody's arm is in a sling, but we can't see mental illness.
You said our community. For me, in a way, I felt like our community in South Korea was much stronger than my community in Canada, because I'm assuming because, you know, the 20 of us or the 10 of us or whatever the circle was at the time were pushed together because, well, we spoke the same language. We were in the same thing. We were all teaching children at the time. We were all trying to navigate a situation where we had foreign employers who didn't understand us. I remember getting into an argument with my principal because she wanted me to slap the kids. If they didn't do their homework, she said they put out their hand, and for, I can't remember every page of homework they didn't do every time, you're supposed to hit it with a ruler. And I was like, not doing that. And it was, she kind of understood where I was coming from, but that was just too bad. Like, I appreciate you don't want to hit someone, especially like a 5-year-old. But this is a job and I'm your boss and this is what you have to do. And it just wasn't a place where employers were used to employees questioning them. It was a lot of blind obedience. And especially when the employee is, you know, a foreigner. I'd be like, well, you need me because my English,
definitely.
You need me because my English is better than yours. So, so you were going through all of that there because I really didn't see it. But did you feel like our community there potentially was stronger than it would have been if you were in Canada just blending into the masses?
Definitely. I found it really hard to find friends after my diagnosis in Victoria before I went to South Korea. And I felt pretty isolated, and a lot of people didn't want to be friends with me. I became a little bit of a black sheep. And so when I came to South Korea, it was people like you and Nick and Brian, and all of us just simply had this understanding that we had each other's back. And I think I was meant to go to South Korea because we did have community. And I do understand that it was unique and we have to move on. But yeah, it has a special place in my heart for sure. And I know what you mean about those employers in South Korea. I would actually have to take this little kid who was 6 years old and he was acting out so much, and I would lift him up, put him over my shoulder, and then drop him in the vice principal's office and just simply move on. So I totally understand what you're talking about.
It was crazy what we were told or allowed to get away with. I found where I worked, at least. Were you at a school or a hagwon? I forget.
I was at a hagwon,
Yeah.
Ishishi hagwon, and then remember I went on to teach university as a professor in Muon.
Right. I think that was, I left not long after that because I also got a job offer at a university in Gwangju. I was teaching English to the law students because I had my law degree at that time. I just wasn't using it yet. And so I went to Gwangju for about a month and taught English to the law students, and then decided, you know what, nope, I got to get back to Canada. I got to start moving forward on the career. Originally, I went to South Korea because I needed to pay off the debt from law school. Like that was how I ended up there. And then after, I don't know, was it 15, 18 months, I was able to cut out enough of a chunk out that I was okay, and I'm going to go back and start working.
Well, I also remember that your father's friend, who I think as well was a lawyer, encouraged you to go there to learn Korean. Did you ever do that?
Not at all. Not at all. Not a chance. Okay, so fast forward, you come back and Bipolar Babe. And now I think I appreciate a bit more where it came from because I didn't see the stigma. I didn't see you suffering from a stigma. I didn't see people in general suffering from this. And maybe I was just a bit oblivious, you know, I'm in Korea, life is great, let's have fun. But then you came back, and I remember seeing it because I don't know if you had a website or your LinkedIn or something, but I have a vivid present recollection of this little purple superhero, like stomping out stigma. I think that was your catchphrase, wasn't it?
It's right above my head, Angela.
It totally is. So how did this come about?
Yeah, so basically, I just put out there that I wanted to speak to the community, share with kids especially about my personal story and what I went through, how I survived it. I even did have a suicide attempt before South Korea, but I ended up in the ICU for 3 days. I made it through, and I talked to the kids all about that stuff because
Mhm.
we need to talk about suicide. It is so taboo, even to this day, that people think you're going to go die by suicide if you just talk about it. So that was a big part of my mission, to ensure that other people didn't feel alone. And so I started speaking in the community, meeting some amazing people. I started networking, and a really good friend, Phil, and he started introducing me to others in the nonprofit community. And then I met the man that changed the course of my life forever, Robin Holden. Bless his soul, he's gone now. But he became my mentor, and he taught me everything I needed to know about building a charity. I didn't understand the dynamics of governance, as an example, that you need to create a board of directors, that you need to incorporate and also apply for charitable status. I would be an executive director staff. I knew nothing. So he brought me on a journey. And then eventually, after meeting him, within 6 months, we created the Bipolar Disorder Society of British Columbia. It first began with that charity.
And then is that the basis or the founding of what the Stigma-Free Society is today, or it's an evolution of it?
It's definitely an evolution. And so for a good 6 years, we were the Bipolar Disorder Society of BC. I became a full-time employee after 3 years, as I worked in the government as a policy analyst. And I couldn't just jump into that position. I needed to fundraise in order to employ staff like myself, like other staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up getting another presenter. We started delivering programs. We had a peer support group for kids. There was a lot going on. And I won a really cool award in 2015 called the Courage to Come Back Award. And in that speech, I was very strategic in saying I wanted to take this charity from Vancouver Island to the rest of the province. And somebody that night named Dave Richardson answered my call, pledged $25,000, and helped make that possible. And I soon moved over to Vancouver for 4 years to really grow that charity.
That's amazing. So you said this man walked you in sort of from a lawyer basis, what is a not-for-profit? What does it need to do to be in compliance? What, like you said, your governance, your board of directors, your incorporation, your charitable status so you can take donations, etc. This man taught you this based on his experience in working within charities. He was an accountant. He was a lawyer, just something that he did for his passion.
The original mentor, Robin, he was a consultant who built his own business called Source Group. And he was a charity consultant. He helped people build charities. And I just happened to randomly meet him when I was wanting in my heart to create a charity. And we met, and I told him my personal story in great detail. And he looked at me and he said, well, why should I help you? I don't even know you that well, or barely at all.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I think you believe in me. And he looked at me with a big smile and said, all right, kiddo, let's do this. And then the second mentor, Dave Richardson, Robin got sick and ill, and, he moved along, but I still saw him, obviously, from time to time. And Dave Richardson is a philanthropist and businessman in Vancouver. He's very passionate about mental health, about stigma, and he ended up sharing his own personal story with depression and anxiety as I started doing speaking engagements across Vancouver. And it empowered him to shatter that self-stigma. Because with stigma, there is social stigma where you're being negatively judged, but there is self-stigma when you are judging yourself.
Agree with that, very much so. So was that, I'm trying to understand, I've never worked within this industry, this area of not-for-profit. Is speaking and education a lot of what you do?
Yeah, so what ended up happening is in 2016, Dave and I teamed up. He became the board chairman, And then we renamed, kept the original society intact with the charitable number, but you can rename as a charity. So we became the Stigma Free Society to have a bigger umbrella. And now today, it's really amazing with the different programs we have. So through COVID, we created toolkits online. And one of our main signature programs is the Student Mental Health Toolkit for educators, parents, and guardians, and also school counselors and youth themselves. So with that toolkit, it's a robust, amazing resource that mainly educators can use in the classroom to talk about mental health, to educate their students, and for them to understand that it is a good thing to reach out for help is the main philosophy. We also have virtual presentations in schools as well. And we have 25 presenters virtually as volunteers receiving honorariums through Stigma Free. And they are giving presentations in schools about their stories. And so Stigma Free began as Andrea's story, but now it's about empowering other people. And we have a few other programs for remote rural mental wellness toolkit, peer support training. So we're doing a lot.
So I'm on your website right now. This is incredible. So I see gain access to the Student Mental Health Toolkit, requesting registration here. So these are free programs and support tools for whoever needs them or wants them.
Definitely.
And I imagine you talk a lot and advertise so that people are like, I learned at this moment in my life that this exists.
So we're raising money for an awareness campaign this year
Okay.
of $100,000. And what we aim to do is we have the tools built, and we do, obviously, we have 24K unique visitors annually so far. And we want to bring this across Canada. And we've made some traction into Manitoba in a big way with their school districts. But there's no reason why it can't be filtered through Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec. We're translating that toolkit. It'll be done in 3 weeks into French. And it's a very exciting time. We're able to offer these resources and tools as we have 30 generous funders who give us money every year. And that's how we're able to provide those services. And we're also supported by the British Columbia government.
Oh, because look at this. I'm on your media videos. You're everywhere. Global news.
Yeah.
Yes. This is fantastic. So you work a lot with the school board. Sorry, I'm pausing here because I'm kind of in awe. Was the school board outreach something that you started? Because I imagine they wouldn't know you existed, so they didn't come to you.
No, it all began back in the beginning of Bipolar Disorder Society and building relationships. So I eventually was able to hire an assistant, an admin person who created databases. And that's how we first began with databases of schools in Victoria. And then it spread out to Vancouver Island. And and we had to contact them, bring them information in person, but also on the phone, sending emails. And it was just about reaching out to the school districts and the schools themselves individually. And then people talk. And then it's word of mouth as well. And people experience something really wonderful. They're going to share it. But now we have more strategy behind our outreach, and I have a lot more staff. So I have a lot more help than I used to, and it makes things much more manageable for a larger organization than what we once were.
And you're primarily now still in Western Canada?
Primarily at this point,
Okay.
so British Columbia provincial, but gaining that national momentum because we've given presentations, as an example, in Alberta, in Ontario. We have trickled in and what I called peppering across the country.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to do. There's a lot more.
Do you feel the need getting more and more recently because social media lets people talk more, our methods of communication are now a lot easier to get out there. But in Ontario, where I am, the last couple years, every time I open the paper, you hear everything like these numbers of people needing help are off the charts. As a teenager and younger, I don't remember this being a topic.
Because it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so it's been really interesting. When I first launched Bipolar Babe in 2009, it wasn't a very common thing to talk about mental health. People were
No.
scared, ashamed. If you Googled the word mental illness in
Yeah.
2009, every picture was scary. There was two faces, they were all dark. And now it's becoming something that is much more talked about, but
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that we've solved the problem.
Yeah.
With COVID, we have seen a huge impact with isolation, people going through fear, all of these different circumstances.
Yeah.
And there's a fallout. And especially with our young people right now, everybody is definitely talking about mental health, which I feel makes us more relevant and helpful than ever.
So as a lawyer, I was, when I came into law 15 years ago, sort of like we're here, and I've had colleagues say, I feel like I'm in a very privileged position in society. I feel that, and in many countries, my profession is seen as a public servant, not so much in Canada and the US, but in Mexico, in South Korea, in, different places in Europe. Did you feel you had the legal help available that you needed, or any awareness, or this was something you really had to search out? And was it ever cost prohibitive?
Well, in terms of legal assistance in the beginning, I highly relied on Robin because he was so well versed and having created charities for,
Hmm.
oh goodness, 30 years. So he understands the legalities around it. And in the beginning, when you're in startup phases of a nonprofit, you cannot even afford to have an office over your head.
Yeah.
So that's why I created remote work back in 2010, because why waste the money?
Hmm.
With legal help, we do contract out lawyers who
Hmm.
help us with our employment contracts. And if we need advice, then we're definitely able to obtain it. But like you said, it is definitely not super affordable, but
Yeah.
there are people who sometimes give nonprofits a little bit of a reduced rate just to ensure that we're able to get the help we need.
Because I can't imagine myself or any of my colleagues that, if they're not dealing with it themselves, don't know at least one person very close to them who will benefit and who needs help from.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
Yeah.
the stresses that we put on ourselves now just causes this, and it inflicts it across the board.
Yeah, and there's 1 in 4 Canadians who are diagnosed with a mental illness or serious mental health issue. It used to be 1 in 5, but the Canadian Mental Health Association of Canada has now said that it's 1 in 4. And if we aren't suffering ourselves, then we do know somebody that
Hmm.
is.
Yeah, and I mean, I always wonder how accurate these numbers are, because I went through a period for about a year and a half, where the panic attacks were really bad, off the chart. Coincided with my articling, which, was not the least stressful year of my life. So I see the cause. But I wouldn't have been included in that number 1 in 4 because I never talked about it.
But you would have been included just in the stat itself. I don't know if they're taking into account those people who aren't disclosing, because how could they, right?
Well, how could they? I mean, I can tell you my medication was a bottle of wine in my parents' basement, because that's the only place I could afford to live. And that was, I had a friend give me stand up comedy videos. So I would work, and then I would go home and watch comedy because it made me laugh, and drink wine, and then wake up in the morning and do it all over again. Got very into running around this time, and that was my medication. But
Yeah.
I had the support of my father, who always really instilled athletics on us, and that's how I got through it. So
Yeah.
I think those numbers are higher, and maybe some people have the internal support, the family support, the friends, but a lot don't.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. And that's when it's
Yeah.
very hard. And there's a lot of stigma around medications too, right? People
Hmm.
think, oh, if I take less or if I get off, then I'll be stronger. And my
Yeah.
mother didn't take medications for 30 years. And every couple of years with her mental illness, she would break down and have to go into the hospital
Yeah.
and just wanted to battle it on her own. But for me, I just realized my brain is missing something that's just wiring a different way. So it's
Right.
really great that I've been able to find the right medication, but it took me 8 years. It's
Yeah.
not like I was disabled or unable to function during those 8 years, but now I'm able to truly thrive. I don't have those mild, weird psychosis feelings, the paranoia, the anxiety, a lot that I dealt with. And so now, over the last how many years, 11, 10, I'm not too sure, that stability is really welcomed. It's really great.
I'm actually beyond thrilled hearing that and watching you, because I can see you on this. Have you ever encountered something you had to fill out? I mean, not a doctor's office because they need to know everything, but like job application or anything along those lines where they ask you, are you on medication or are you? I was watching I can't remember, Dateline or something last week where a man in the States was talking about all of the questions he gets asked since being released from jail 20 years ago for a stupid thing he did when he was 19 that he's prevented from doing or that he has to disclose, 25 years later. Like you're saying, he's not allowed to chaperone his kids' school trips because he did something silly when he was 19. And I realize the US is a bit different from us on some points. But have you ever encountered where you have to disclose that in a situation where you don't feel you should have to?
It brings me back to when I got back from South Korea. I ended up getting a job in the Ministry of Social Development and Social Innovation. And I was miserable for 6 years, but I eventually transitioned out. But during that time, I had to have the interview. And so I ended up kind of on the spot disclosing myself. And they didn't ask. But when they asked me if I had any experience with project management, I kind of stumbled and I told them about the management of my mental illness and how it takes therapy and it takes different components to support its success. And I also talked about my psychiatrist, and I kind of just brought together this answer that got blurted out. And I thought, for sure, I am not getting hired. And I did. I couldn't believe it. And one of the things that did bother me, though, is when I was hired and there was a new manager coming on a few weeks after me, they said, oh, you need to go tell your new manager about your condition. These people were like assistant deputy ministers saying that I had to go and do that, when really it's my choice if I want to disclose my mental illness.
Yeah.
And it felt unnerving, but I was very lucky at the time to have a very supportive employer. But when she left, I ended up getting a very stigmatizing employer who would leave me at my desk to collect dust upstairs from her office was downstairs, and had no faith in me. And really, I was stigmatized of just being incapable or not even smart or having these judgments passed on me. And so there's a lot of stigma in the workplace, but there's also a lot of really great campaigns that people can embark on within workplaces. And Canadian Mental Health Association has different ones, Mental Health Commission of Canada. So there's different campaigns that's becoming more normal. And really, I've never been asked in a form or anything like that if I take medication. I don't think anyone's legally allowed to do that. I don't know personally. But I have applied way before for jobs or things like that. And they say, do you have a disability? And you check yes, but then that makes you favorable because you have a disability. Or does it? Who really knows?
So if somebody wants to get in touch with your society and is looking for programs or options or discussion of options, all these different things, what's the best, just through your website?
Yeah, definitely. You can reach me at stigmafreesociety.com. There's a contact tab, and that simply goes to me directly and my administrative assistant, and we will always get back to you if you have any questions about our programs, our mission, anything that we are doing. We're always engaging volunteers from the community as well. And yeah, super excited to hear from everybody. We really want especially families, like that student mental health toolkit's not just for educators, but a lot of parents out there are suffering and feeling lost, and we're here to help.
Andrea, this is incredible. Like I said, I think I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of playing on your website for the next couple hours. But thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. So thank you so very much. And we'll have a new website in 4 weeks, brand new. So I hope that you can check it out then as well.
Will do. It's been fantastic to connect with you again after all this time.
Thank you.